My phone buzzed at 3 a.m. with a text that made my blood run cold. After 9 years of complete silence, my mother was demanding half of my father's $2 million life insurance policy. The same woman who chose her new husband over her own daughter, who threw me out at 17 when I refused to pretend her affair partner was my family. Now with Dad gone and money on the table, she suddenly remembered I existed, but she had no idea what I had discovered about her precious husband. Call to action. Before we dive into this wild family revenge story, I need to know, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your location in the comments below. And if you are ready for a story about family betrayal, justice served cold, and the most satisfying karma comeback ever, smash that like button and hit subscribe. Because this tale of family vengeance will have you questioning everything you thought you knew about blood loyalty. Trust me, you will want to stick around for this shocking twist. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. My name is Serafina, and 9 years ago, I was just an 18-year-old girl who thought family meant something. My father, Marcus, was a successful insurance broker who worked 60-hour weeks to provide for us. My mother, Patricia, seemed like the perfect suburban wife until she was not. The cracks started showing when I was 16. Mom began staying out late, claiming book club meetings and volunteer work. Dad would sit at the dinner table, fork halfway to his mouth, staring at her empty chair. I remember the way his shoulders would sag, how he would ask me about my day twice, because his mind was elsewhere. Everything exploded the summer before my senior year. I came home early from lifeguard duty to find Mom in our living room with a man I had never seen before. They were not just talking. She was sitting on his lap, his hands tangled in her hair, kissing him like Dad had never existed. The man was tall, silver-haired, and wearing an expensive suit that screamed money. When she saw me, Mom did not even have the decency to look ashamed. She stood up, smoothed her dress, and said words that still echo in my nightmares. "Serafina, meet Richard. We are getting married after I divorce your father." I was 17, standing in my own home, watching my world implode. "What about Dad?" I whispered. Her laugh was cold, calculating. "Your father is a nice man, but Richard can give me the life I deserve, the life I should have had all along." Richard stepped forward, extending his hand like we were meeting at a country club instead of in the wreckage of my family. "I have heard so much about you, Serafina. I hope we can be friends." I looked at his manicured fingers, his practiced smile, and felt something dark twist in my stomach. "Get out of my house!" Mom's face hardened. "Actually, this will be Richard's house soon. He is buying us a beautiful place in Malibu. Much better than this middle-class prison your father trapped me in." The next 3 months were warfare. Dad moved into the guest room, walking around like a ghost. Mom paraded Richard everywhere, introducing him at the grocery store, at parent-teacher conferences, even at Dad's company barbecue. The humiliation was surgical, precise, designed to break him completely. But the worst part was not watching Dad crumble. It was watching Mom transform into someone unrecognizable. She started wearing designer clothes, getting expensive treatments, talking about art galleries and wine tastings, like she had not spent 20 years complaining about Dad's boring middle-class lifestyle. When she served Dad the divorce papers, she made sure I was there to witness it. "I need you to understand something, Serafina," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Sometimes people outgrow their circumstances. I have outgrown this life, and I will not apologize for wanting better." Dad signed without a fight. He gave her the house, the cars, even half his retirement fund. All he asked for was shared custody of me. But Mom had other plans. "Richard does not feel comfortable having Marcus's daughter around," she announced over dinner one night, Richard nodding sympathetically beside her. "It would be awkward for our new family dynamic." "I am your daughter," I said, my voice cracking. "Not just Dad's daughter, yours." Richard leaned forward, his smile never wavering. "Of course you are, sweetie, but sometimes fresh starts require difficult choices. Your mother and I think it would be best if you stayed with your father full-time. We will visit, of course." Visit. Like I was some distant relative instead of her flesh and blood. The final blow came 2 weeks before they moved to Malibu. I found Mom packing my baby photos, my school awards, everything that proved I had ever existed in her life. When I confronted her, she did not even pause. I am starting over, Serafina. Completely over. Richard wants a clean slate, and so do I. What about me? The question came out broken, desperate. She finally looked at me, then really looked at me, and her eyes were strangers' eyes. You remind me too much of the life I am leaving behind. Every time I see you, I see your father's disappointment, this house's mediocrity, all the dreams I gave up. I cannot take that energy into my new life. That night, she told me I had until the end of the month to move in with Dad permanently. No weekend visits, no shared holidays, no contact until I could respect her choices and her new husband. I chose Dad. I chose love over money, loyalty over luxury. And for that crime, my mother erased me from her life like I had never existed. For 9 years, I built a life without her. Dad and I became incredibly close. He walked me down the aisle when I married my husband, James, 2 years ago. He was there when I graduated college, when I started my own marketing company, when I bought my first house. He became both parents to me, and I became his anchor after the storm Mom left in her wake. 3 months ago, Dad had a massive heart attack at 58. The doctor said it was sudden, probably stress-related. I held his hand as he died, whispering that I loved him, that he had been enough, that he had been everything. Mom did not come to the funeral. She did not send flowers. She did not even acknowledge that the man who loved her for 22 years had died. But apparently she knew about the life insurance policy. The text that woke me up at 3 a.m. was just the beginning. Serafina, I know we have had our differences, but Marcus was my husband first. I have legal rights to his life insurance. We need to split it 50-50. I will have my lawyer contact you. 9 years of silence, and this was her first words to me. Not condolences, not regret. Just a demand for money from the man she destroyed. But as I stared at that text, something clicked into place. A memory from that awful summer, something Richard had said that never made sense until now. Something about Patricia deserving better, about the life she should have had all along. What if Mom's betrayal was not just about trading up for a richer man? What if there was something bigger, something that connected her past to her present demands? I had 48 hours before her lawyer would contact me. 48 hours to figure out what Mom was really after and why she thought she deserved Dad's money after everything she had done. I had no idea that investigating my mother's motives would uncover a conspiracy that had been 9 years in the making. The next morning, I could not focus on anything except that text. My husband James found me at the kitchen table at 6 a.m., surrounded by coffee cups and legal documents, my laptop open to multiple browser tabs about life insurance law. "Sarah, you have been up all night," he said, his voice gentle with concern. "This cannot be healthy." I showed him the text. James had never met my mother, but he had lived with the aftermath of her abandonment for the 2 years we had been together. He knew how her rejection had shaped me, how hard I had worked to build a family with Dad that felt whole again. His jaw tightened as he read. "She has some nerve. After everything she put you and your father through, now she wants money. That is just it," I said, pulling up Dad's insurance policy on my laptop. "Look at this. Dad bought this policy 6 years ago, 3 years after the divorce was finalized. Mom is not listed as a beneficiary anywhere. I am the sole beneficiary. She has no legal claim to anything." James frowned, reading over my shoulder. "Then why is she so confident? Why bring lawyers into it?" That question haunted me all day. I knew my mother was calculating, but she was not stupid. She would not make legal threats unless she thought she had some kind of leverage. But what I decided to call Dad's lawyer, Harold Martinez, who had handled both the divorce and Dad's will. Harold was old school, the kind of attorney who still kept paper files and remembered every client's story. "Serafina," he said warmly when I reached him. "How are you holding up, sweetheart?" I explained about Mom's text, about her demand for half the insurance money. Harold listened quietly, then sighed heavily. "Your father was very specific about that policy," he said. "After what your mother put him through, he wanted to make sure everything went to you. She signed away any claim to his assets in the divorce settlement. Then what is she playing at? Harold paused. Has she remarried that Richard fellow? As far as I know, yes. They moved to Malibu 9 years ago. Why? Another pause longer this time. Serafina, there is something I probably should have told you years ago, but your father made me promise to keep it quiet, unless it became relevant. My heart started pounding. What kind of something? After your mother left, your father hired a private investigator. He needed to know if there were any hidden assets before he agreed to the divorce settlement. What they found was disturbing. I gripped the phone tighter. Harold, what did they find? Richard was not just some wealthy man your mother met. He was married. Had been married for 15 years to a woman named Eleanor Blackwood. Very wealthy family, old money from textile manufacturing. Richard was essentially living a double life. The room started spinning. You mean Mom was the other woman? It gets worse. The investigator discovered that Richard had done this before. At least 3 times. He would target married women from middle-class families, seduce them, convince them to leave their husbands, and then disappear once the divorce was finalized and the assets were split. Classic con man behavior. I felt sick. Did Dad tell Mom about this? He tried. 2 days before she left for Malibu. He begged her to reconsider, showed her the evidence. She accused him of being jealous and desperate, said he was making it all up to win her back. So she married him anyway. Harold's voice grew grim. That is where it gets interesting. According to the investigator's final report, Richard never divorced his first wife, which means his marriage to your mother was never legal. The pieces started falling into place. If Mom had been living in a bigamous marriage for 9 years, if Richard had eventually abandoned her like he had the others, she would be left with nothing. No legal claim to his assets, no spousal support, no security net. Harold, I said slowly, what if Mom is broke? What if Richard left her and now she is desperate? That would explain the sudden interest in your father's life insurance, he agreed. But Serafina, she still has no legal claim. The policy is ironclad. After I hung up, I sat staring at my phone for a long time. Part of me felt a savage satisfaction knowing that Mom's grand plan had blown up in her face. She had traded a loving family for fool's gold and deserved whatever consequences came with that choice. But another part of me, the part that still remembered being a little girl who worshipped her mother, felt something uncomfortably close to pity. That evening, James found me on our back porch, watching the sunset and thinking about family loyalty justice and the price of betrayal. "What are you going to do?" he asked, settling into the chair beside me. "I am going to find out exactly what happened to Mom these past 9 years," I said. "If she is in trouble, if Richard conned her the way Harold thinks he did, I need to know the whole truth before I decide how to respond." James raised an eyebrow. "You are thinking about helping her." "I am thinking about understanding her. There is a difference." That night, I started my own investigation. If Mom wanted to play games with Dad's money, she was going to discover that his daughter had inherited more than just his life insurance policy. I had inherited his sense of justice, his methodical patience, and his absolute refusal to be manipulated. But I also had something Dad never had: the internet, social media, and a network of professional contacts that spanned the country. If Richard had been running cons for years, there would be a trail. If Mom was truly desperate, there would be evidence. And if she thought she could guilt-trip me into sharing money that belonged to the man she had destroyed, she was about to learn that 9 years of silence had not made me weak. It had made me strategic. I opened my laptop and began typing "Richard Malibu bigamy fraud" into the search bar. Whatever I found, whatever truth lay buried in their perfect Malibu life, I was going to uncover it. Because before I decided whether Mom deserved my pity or my fury, I needed to know exactly what kind of game she had been playing all these years. My investigation into Richard's background became an obsession over the next 3 days. What I discovered was far worse than even Harold had suspected. Richard was not just a serial bigamist. He was the mastermind behind an elaborate insurance fraud scheme that had been operating for over 15 years. The deeper I dug, the clearer the pattern became. Richard would target women like my mother, attractive, middle-aged, married to financially stable but not wealthy men. He would seduce them, convince them to divorce their husbands, and then pressure them to take out large life insurance policies, naming him as beneficiary. Within a year or two of the marriage, the women would die in suspicious accidents. I found newspaper articles about 3 different women over the past decade. Sarah Martinez in Phoenix died in a hiking accident 6 months after her divorce was finalized. Jennifer Walsh in Denver, carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty furnace in the home Richard had insisted they rent. Lisa Park in Seattle car accident on a rainy night brake failure that the insurance company had questioned but never proven was sabotage. Each woman had followed the same pattern as my mother: middle-class marriage affair with Richard, acrimonious divorce, quick remarriage that was not legally valid, large insurance policy, and then death. My hands were shaking as I printed out the articles. Mom had been living with a serial killer for 9 years, and she had no idea. I called Harold immediately. "You need to contact the FBI," I told him without preamble. "Richard is not just a con man, he is a murderer." I spent the next hour walking Harold through everything I had found. To his credit, he did not question my research or suggest I was overreacting. By the end of our conversation, he was as horrified as I was. "Serafina, if you are right about this, your mother could be in immediate danger. Why do you think she is still alive?" I had been wondering the same thing. Maybe because she never actually married him legally. Maybe he needed her to stay alive to maintain his cover story in Malibu. Or maybe— I paused, a terrible thought occurring to me. Maybe he has been waiting for the right moment. Maybe Dad's death was that moment. "What do you mean? Think about it. Mom suddenly contacts me demanding half of Dad's insurance money. What if that was not her idea? What if Richard is behind it? If he can get his hands on $2 million, that would be his biggest score yet. And then Mom would become a liability he needed to eliminate." Harold was quiet for a long moment. "We need to call the police. Tonight." But when I tried calling the Malibu Police Department, I hit a wall. They would not take my concerns seriously without concrete evidence of an immediate threat. The detective I spoke with was polite but dismissive. "Ma'am, we cannot investigate someone for crimes they might commit based on internet research and speculation." Frustrated but not defeated, I decided to take a different approach. If the police would not listen to me, maybe they would listen to someone with more credibility. I spent the next day reaching out to the investigating officers who had handled the suspicious deaths in Phoenix, Denver, and Seattle. 2 of the 3 cases were still technically open, though inactive. Detective Maria Gonzalez in Phoenix was particularly interested in what I had found. "We always suspected Richard was involved in Sarah Martinez's death," she told me during our phone call. "But he had an airtight alibi, and we could never prove he had tampered with her hiking equipment. If you are right about him being a serial killer, it changes everything." Detective Gonzalez agreed to contact the FBI and share information with the other jurisdictions. She also gave me advice that probably saved my mother's life. "Do not contact your mother directly. If Richard is planning to kill her, any disruption to his timeline could accelerate his plans. We need to gather evidence first." That evening, James found me pacing our living room, my phone in one hand and a glass of wine in the other. "The waiting is killing me," I admitted. "What if I am too late? What if he hurts her while we are building a case?" James pulled me into his arms. "You are doing everything right, Sarah. You cannot save someone who does not want to be saved, but you can make sure justice is served." His words reminded me of something Dad used to say. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting the truth come to light. The breakthrough came on Friday morning. Detective Gonzalez called with news that made my blood run cold and my heart race at the same time. "We got him," she said without preamble. "The FBI raided Richard's Malibu house this morning. They found evidence linking him to all 4 murders, plus 2 more we had not connected to him yet. Insurance fraud, bigamy murder in the 1st degree. He is never seeing the outside of a prison cell again." "What about my mother?" "She is alive, but Serafina, she was not as innocent as you thought." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean? Your mother was not just another victim. She was his partner. The FBI found documents proving she knew about the other women, knew about the insurance fraud, knew about the murders. She helped him research targets, helped him perfect his approach. She was an active participant in his crimes. The phone slipped from my hand. James caught it before it hit the floor, taking over the conversation while I sat down hard on our couch, my world tilting off its axis. Everything I thought I knew about my mother, everything I had been prepared to forgive, crumbled in an instant. She had not just abandoned her family for a better life. She had abandoned her family to become an accomplice to murder. When James hung up, he sat beside me and took my hands. "The detective wants to talk to you more about the insurance money your mother was demanding. They think it was supposed to be their retirement fund after one final score." I started laughing, a bitter, broken sound. "She was going to kill me. What? Don't you see I am the beneficiary of a $2 million life insurance policy? I was supposed to be their final victim. Mom was not trying to con me out of half the money. She was setting up the groundwork to take all of it after Richard murdered me." The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Mom's sudden contact after 9 years of silence. Her insistence on meeting to discuss the insurance money. Richard would have studied my routine, planned an accident, and then Mom would have played the grieving mother inheriting everything as my next of kin. They had turned patricide into a business model, and I had been their intended final victim. James pulled me closer as I shook with rage and relief and a dozen other emotions I could not name. "It is over now," he whispered. "They can never hurt you or anyone else again." But it was not over. Not yet. I still had one more card to play, one final move in this sick game my mother had started 9 years ago when she chose money over family. I picked up my phone and opened her text thread, typing a message I had been crafting in my mind since Detective Gonzalez's call. "Mom, I have been thinking about your offer to split Dad's insurance money. You are right. We should meet in person to discuss it. How about tomorrow afternoon? I have some documents I think you will find very interesting." Her response came within minutes. "Thank you for being reasonable, sweetheart. I knew you would understand family comes first." Family comes first. After everything she had done, everything she had planned to do, she still had the audacity to invoke family loyalty. But she was right about one thing. Family did come first. And I was about to show her exactly what that meant. I never got the chance to meet my mother that afternoon. At 11 a.m., just 3 hours before our scheduled meeting, Detective Gonzalez called with an update that changed everything. "Your mother tried to run," she said. "Airport security detained her at LAX with a fake passport and $200,000 in cash. She was booked on a flight to Costa Rica under the name Patricia Whitman." Even in custody, Mom was still playing games, still trying to manipulate the system. But her arrest revealed something that made my blood boil. She had been planning to disappear with Richard's money, leaving me to deal with the legal aftermath of their crimes. The FBI had seized Richard's financial records, and what they found was staggering. Over 15 years, he and my mother had stolen over $8 million through insurance fraud and murder. They had been living like royalty in Malibu, while their victims' families struggled with grief and financial ruin. Detective Gonzalez explained that Mom had been the perfect partner for Richard's schemes. As a seemingly innocent middle-aged woman, she could befriend the wives of their targets, gain their trust, and gather information about their finances and daily routines. She would play the sympathetic friend, encouraging these women to confide in her about their marital problems, making them vulnerable to Richard's advances. "We found journals in your mother's handwriting," Detective Gonzalez told me. "Detailed notes about each victim, their fears, their dreams, their weaknesses. She studied them like a predator studies prey." The journals also revealed the truth about why Mom was still alive after 9 years with Richard. She was not just another victim who had gotten lucky. She was his business partner and the love of his life in the most twisted way possible. They had found each other two sociopaths who fed off each other's darkness. But the most chilling discovery was a folder labeled Serafina, hidden in their home safe. It contained photographs of me, copies of my social media posts, my work schedule, even the route I took to my office every morning. They had been planning my murder for months, waiting for the perfect moment after Dad's death. The folder included a detailed timeline Mom would reconcile with me over Dad's insurance money. We would meet regularly to rebuild our relationship, and then I would die in what appeared to be a random car accident. Richard had already identified the perfect location, a winding mountain road I sometimes took when visiting James's parents in the countryside. Reading about their plans for my death was surreal, like watching a movie about someone else's life. But what made it personal, what made it hurt, was finding a handwritten note from Mom at the bottom of the folder. Serafina always was too trusting, just like her father. She will be easy. That night I could not sleep. I kept thinking about all the times over the years when I had wondered if I should reach out to Mom, if I should try to repair our relationship. Every moment of doubt, every pang of missing her felt like a betrayal of my own survival instincts. James held me as I cried angry tears for the mother I thought I had lost and the mother I had never actually had. "She was never the person you thought she was," he said gently. "The woman who raised you, who sang you lullabies, and bandaged your scraped knees. That was an act. This is who she really is." The next morning brought news that the case was bigger than anyone had imagined. Richard's arrest had triggered a multi-state investigation that uncovered a network of insurance fraud spanning 2 decades. The FBI had identified 12 confirmed victims and were investigating 8 more suspicious deaths. Mom's cooperation with federal investigators revealed the scope of their operation. They had been meticulous record keepers documenting every crime with the pride of successful entrepreneurs. Richard had even created a twisted business plan, complete with target demographics and profit projections. The insurance companies were cooperating fully with the investigation, eager to recover the millions that had been fraudulently paid out over the years. Several of the victims' families were filing civil suits, seeking justice for their loved ones who had died believing they were simply unlucky. But the most satisfying moment came when I learned about Richard's reaction to being caught. According to Detective Gonzalez, he had completely broken down when confronted with the evidence. The charming, confident manipulator had revealed himself to be a coward who sobbed and begged for mercy when faced with the consequences of his actions. Mom, on the other hand, had shown no remorse whatsoever. Even in custody, she was trying to negotiate a plea deal offering to testify against Richard in exchange for a reduced sentence. She seemed genuinely surprised that anyone would judge her harshly for her choices. "She keeps insisting that she was just trying to build a better life for herself," Detective Gonzalez told me. "She cannot understand why people are calling her a monster. In her mind, she is the victim of circumstances beyond her control." The federal prosecutor assigned to the case, Angela Torres, called me personally to discuss my role as a witness. She explained that my testimony would be crucial in establishing the pattern of targeting middle-class families and the long-term psychological impact of their crimes. "Your story is different from the other victims because you survived," she said. "You represent all the families they destroyed, all the children who lost parents to their greed. Your voice will be powerful in court." I agreed to testify not just for justice but for closure. I needed to look my mother in the eye and let her know that her final victim had beaten her at her own game. The media attention was overwhelming. Local news stations picked up the story first, then national outlets began covering what they called the insurance murders. I gave one carefully prepared interview focusing on the victims rather than my personal story. "These were not faceless statistics," I said to the reporter. "These were mothers, wives, daughters who trusted the wrong people and paid with their lives. They deserve to be remembered for who they were, not how they died." But privately, I was struggling with a complex mix of emotions. Relief that I had survived rage at the betrayal, and a strange kind of grief for the mother I had thought I knew. Even knowing what she had done, part of me mourned the fantasy of someday reconciling with her. James suggested therapy, and I started seeing Dr. Sarah Chen, a specialist in family trauma. She helped me understand that grieving the loss of a relationship, even a toxic one, was normal and healthy. "Your mother's crimes do not invalidate the love you felt for her as a child," Dr. Chen explained. "That little girl who missed her mommy was not wrong to feel that way. She was responding to the only mother she knew how to love." As the date for Richard and Mom's arraignment approached, I realized that this nightmare was finally coming to an end. Justice would be served, the victims' families would have closure, and I would have the chance to reclaim my life from the shadow of their crimes. But first, I had to face my mother one last time in court. The arraignment was scheduled for a cold Tuesday morning in downtown Los Angeles. I arrived early wanting to see Mom's face when she realized I knew everything. James came with me along with Harold Martinez and Detective Gonzalez, who had become something like a guardian angel throughout this ordeal. When they brought Mom into the courtroom, I barely recognized her. Gone was the polished, designer-dressed woman who had walked out of my life 9 years earlier. Her hair was gray and unkempt, her face gaunt, her orange jumpsuit hanging loose on her diminished frame. She looked every one of her 57 years, and then some. But her eyes were the same. Cold, calculating, searching the courtroom for advantages and opportunities, even in shackles. When she spotted me in the gallery, her expression shifted through several emotions in quick succession: surprise, hope, calculation, and finally something that might have been genuine fear. She whispered urgently to her public defender, pointing in my direction. Richard looked worse. The confident predator had been replaced by a broken old man who seemed confused about where he was and what was happening. His lawyer later told reporters that Richard was claiming mental incompetence, hoping to avoid the death penalty that federal prosecutors were considering. The charges were read aloud: multiple counts of murder in the first-degree insurance fraud, mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering. The prosecutors painted a picture of a criminal enterprise that had operated with cold efficiency for nearly 2 decades. When Judge Patricia Morrison asked how they pleaded, Richard's lawyer entered a plea of not guilty by reason of mental defect. Mom's lawyer tried the same strategy, claiming she had been manipulated and coerced by Richard. But then something unexpected happened. Mom fired her public defender on the spot. "Your Honor," she said, standing up, despite her lawyer's protests, "I want to represent myself, and I want to make a statement." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Morrison banged her gavel for order, while Mom's former lawyer frantically tried to advise her against self-representation. "Mrs. Williams," the judge said sternly, "I strongly advise against representing yourself in a capital murder case. Do you understand the serious nature of these charges?" Mom smiled, then the same cold smile I remembered from that awful summer. "I understand perfectly, Your Honor. I also understand that everyone in this courtroom has been listening to lies about me." She turned to face the gallery, her eyes finding mine immediately. "My daughter thinks she knows the truth about me, but she does not understand what it means to be trapped in a life that is slowly suffocating you. She does not understand what it means to discover that you have wasted 20 years on a man who could never give you what you deserved." I felt James's hand squeeze mine as Mom continued her rambling justification. "Yes, I left my first marriage. Yes, I chose Richard over a life of mediocrity with Marcus. But everything else, the murders, the fraud, the planning, that was all Richard's idea. I was just trying to survive in a world where women like me have no power, no options, no choices, except to please the men who control our lives." Judge Morrison tried to stop her, but Mom was on a roll, years of carefully constructed lies pouring out in a desperate stream. My daughter sits there judging me, but she has no idea what I sacrificed for her and her father. 22 years of cooking and cleaning and pretending to be satisfied with a boring life in a boring house with a boring man who thought taking me to Applebee's was romance. The prosecutor, Angela Torres, was taking notes furiously. Every word Mom spoke was digging her grave deeper. "I never wanted anyone to get hurt," Mom continued, her voice rising. "But Richard said it was the only way we could be together, the only way we could have the life we deserved. He said if I really loved him, I would help him just this once, and then we could disappear and start over." Just this once had turned into 12 murders over 15 years. Judge Morrison finally cut her off, ordering bailiffs to restrain Mom as she began screaming about being misunderstood and victimized by a system that punished women for wanting more than society said they deserved. As they dragged her from the courtroom, she locked eyes with me one final time and shouted, You think you have won, Serafina? You think destroying your own mother makes you righteous? You are just like your father, small, petty, and incapable of understanding greatness when you see it." The courtroom fell silent after she was removed. I sat there shaking not from fear, but from a rage so pure it felt like electricity in my veins. That afternoon, Angela Torres called to tell me that Mom's outburst had essentially sealed her fate. She confessed to conspiracy and accessory to murder in open court, Torres said. Her lawyers, the new ones the court appointed after she was declared mentally incompetent to represent herself, are talking about a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. The plea negotiations revealed even more horrifying details. Mom had not just helped Richard identify and research victims. She had been present for 2 of the murders, acting as lookout, while Richard staged the accidents. She had helped dispose of evidence, create false alibis, and even comforted grieving family members at funerals, while knowing exactly how their loved ones had died. The insurance companies began reaching out to victims' families about settlements. Several families asked to speak with me, thanking me for the investigation that had brought their loved ones' killers to justice. Sarah Martinez's sister called me personally. "We never gave up hope that someday we would know the truth about Sarah's death," she said through tears. She was terrified of heights, would never have gone hiking alone on that trail. We knew someone had hurt her, but the police said we were just grieving sisters who could not accept an accident. Each conversation with victims' families reinforced my decision to see this through to the end. This was bigger than my personal pain or family drama. This was about justice for people who had trusted the wrong person and paid with their lives. 3 weeks after the arraignment, Richard died by suicide in his cell. He had somehow obtained a razor blade and opened his wrists during the night shift. His death meant he would never face trial for his crimes, never be held accountable by a jury of his peers. But Mom was very much alive and now facing all the charges alone. Her new legal strategy was to claim that Richard had threatened to kill her if she did not cooperate, that she was as much a victim as the women they had murdered. The evidence told a different story. The journals, the photographs, the meticulous planning, all of it pointed to an enthusiastic partner, not a reluctant victim. Mom's trial was set for 6 months away. I would have to testify, would have to face her again and tell the world about the mother who had tried to have me killed for insurance money. But I was ready. I had Dad's strength, James's support, and the knowledge that justice delayed was not justice denied. The trial lasted 3 weeks, and every day felt like walking through fire. I testified on day 12, spending 6 hours on the witness stand describing my childhood, my parents' marriage, and the methodical way Mom had erased me from her life when I became inconvenient to her new plans. The hardest part was not the cross-examination or the hostile questions from Mom's defense attorney. It was watching Mom sit at the defendant's table, occasionally shaking her head or rolling her eyes when I described our relationship as if my memories were fabrications designed to hurt her. She had lost weight during her months in custody, and her hair had gone completely gray. But her eyes remained the same calculating cold, perpetually searching for an angle to exploit. Even facing life in prison, she was still playing games, still believing she could manipulate her way out of consequences. When I described finding the folder with my photographs and the murder timeline, Mom actually laughed out loud, causing Judge Morrison to threaten her with contempt of court. Her lawyer tried to claim the folder was Richard's idea, that Mom had known nothing about plans to kill me. But the prosecutors had done their homework. They played recordings of phone calls between Mom and Richard, discussing my accident-found bank records, showing Mom had researched life insurance policies in my name, and presented testimony from a Malibu mechanic who remembered Mom asking detailed questions about brake failure in car accidents. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts, 12 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, 12 counts of accessory to murder, insurance fraud, mail fraud, wire fraud, and racketeering. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 99 years for the fraud charges. As the verdict was read, Mom turned to look at me one final time. I expected to see defeat or remorse or even hatred. Instead, I saw something worse: complete indifference. She looked at me the same way she might look at a stranger on the street, someone whose existence meant nothing to her at all. That look told me everything I needed to know about who my mother really was and who she had always been. After the trial, I thought I would feel triumphant, or vindicated, or at least relieved. Instead, I felt empty. The woman who had given birth to me, who had been my first concept of love and safety, was going to die in prison as a convicted serial killer. There was no joy in that outcome, only the grim satisfaction of knowing justice had been served. James and I went home that night and sat on our back porch, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the sunset. We did not talk about the trial, or Mom, or any of it. We talked about ordinary things, our weekend plans, the novel I was reading, whether we should plant tomatoes in the garden this spring. Normal life felt like a foreign language I was slowly relearning. 3 months after the sentencing, I received an unexpected visitor. Eleanor Blackwood Richards' actual wife had tracked me down through my lawyer. She was an elegant woman in her 70s, with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. "I wanted to thank you," she said over coffee at my kitchen table. "If you had not started investigating, Richard would still be out there, and I would never have known what happened to all those women." Eleanor told me that she had suspected Richard of having affairs over the years, but had never imagined the scope of his crimes. She had genuinely believed he was a successful business consultant who traveled frequently for work. The Malibu house, the expensive lifestyle with my mother, all of it had been funded by life insurance money from murdered women. "I keep thinking about those poor families," Eleanor said, her voice breaking. All those years they wondered what really happened to their loved ones, and I was living comfortably off their grief without even knowing it. She had liquidated Richard's assets and was donating everything to a victims' compensation fund, keeping only enough to maintain her small apartment and cover basic living expenses for her remaining years. Before she left, Eleanor gave me something that brought me to tears: a photo of my father that she had found among Richard's possessions. It was a surveillance photo taken months before Dad's death, showing him leaving his office building with a smile on his face. "Richard was already planning your murder before your father died," Eleanor explained. "This photo was in a file with your name on it. I thought you should have it. Should know that your father looked happy in his final months. Whatever your mother put him through, he had found peace." Looking at that photo, seeing Dad's genuine smile, I realized that he had not just survived Mom's betrayal, he had thrived after it. He had built a life filled with meaningful work, close friendships, and a daughter who adored him. Mom's abandonment had not destroyed him. It had freed him to become the person he was meant to be. 6 months later, James and I decided to start our own family. Not to replace what I had lost, or to fill some void left by Mom's crimes, but because we had built something beautiful together and wanted to share it with a child. When our daughter Emma was born 2 years later, I held her tiny hand and made a promise she would never doubt her worth, never question whether she was loved, never have to choose between loyalty and safety. I also started a nonprofit organization called Truth and Justice Foundation, providing resources for families of murder victims and supporting investigations into cold cases. Sarah Martinez's sister became our first board member, and we have helped solve 6 previously unsolved murders in our first year of operation. Sometimes people ask me if I ever think about visiting Mom in prison, if there is any part of me that wants closure or reconciliation. The answer is no. I have all the closure I need. She made her choices, and I have made mine. My family now consists of James Emma Harold Martinez, who has become like a grandfather to us, Detective Gonzalez, who sends Emma birthday cards, and a chosen community of friends who support each other through life's challenges and celebrations. Blood does not make family. Love makes family. Loyalty makes family. Showing up for each other during the hard times makes family. I learned that lesson from the man who raised me with patience and devotion, who walked me down the aisle and held his granddaughter before he died. Dad taught me that family is not about genetics or obligation. It is about choosing to love someone every single day, even when it is difficult. Mom taught me a different lesson, that some people are incapable of real love, that some betrayals cannot be forgiven, and that protecting yourself and the people you care about is not selfish. It is necessary. I think about the woman who tried to have me killed for insurance money, and I feel nothing but pity for her wasted life and empty heart. But I also feel grateful because her crimes revealed the depth of love I am surrounded by every day. Justice was served, the truth came to light, and I survived to build a life worth living. What more could anyone ask for? So here is my question for all of you watching. Have you ever experienced family betrayal that completely changed how you see blood loyalty? Have you had to choose between toxic family members and your own well-being? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes sharing these experiences helps us all feel less alone. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family drama and finding justice. And please share this video with anyone who might need to hear that they are not crazy for cutting toxic people out of their lives, even when those people are family. Thank you so much for listening to my story and for being part of this community where we support each other through the hardest chapters of our lives. Remember, you deserve to be surrounded by people who choose you every single day, and sometimes the family we build is stronger than the family we were born into.